Hello, bakers. My name is Mark Flurka. I'm your podcast host for Baked in Science podcast with Bakerpedia. And this is your Thought Leadership Thursday. Today, we have some excellent speakers with us from Brabender. Brabender is an instrument company that does all kinds of analytical instrumentation, and we are mostly familiar with it in the milling and flour and baking industry. And so, first of all, I'd like to introduce Marcus Lerns. Marcus is in Germany. So, could you please tell us a little bit about your position with Brabender and your background?
Yeah, hello. My name is Markus. I'm business development manager here at Brabender. I stay with the company since more than 20 years. My background is I learned the profession of the baker many years ago. So I know a little bit what is dough. After that, I made a study, worked some years at the University of Hannover in Germany, and now I stay here at Brabender, one of the leading companies for products for milling, baking industry, for lab equipment.
Oh, excellent. I grew up in Hanover. I was born in Canada, but I lived in Hanover from when I was 12 until I was 21. I lived in Hanover and worked as a conditor in Hanover. So interesting. We have something in common with each other.
Yeah, so maybe we can forward in German. If I'm sure
Yeah,
you have the
yeah.
German language.
And also we have with us today, we have Sal. Sal, can you please introduce yourself? You have a very lustrous background and your connection with Brabender or Brabender, as we call it in North America.
Thank you, Mark. And I really appreciate Marcus, our colleague. It's 8 o'clock in Germany, so we shouldn't forget that. So he's definitely doing overtime. My name is Sal Iquez. I was with Brabender from 1986 through roughly about 2020, about 34 years or so. In 2020, I decided to start my own company. Basically, it's called Gemelli Scientific. Named the company after my son Vince. He's a surviving twin, and Gemelli means twins in Italian. And I just decided to stay within the industry, but primarily I'm doing work with Brabender. I'm doing similar things that I was doing before. Been doing all the shows, the conferences, the expos, and I'm just doing it in a different capacity now.
And
Since 20.
and we can see you have two pictures there behind you on
Yes,
your
yes,
armoire or whatever
yes.
there.
Thank you for
So
noticing that. Yes.
yeah, tell us a little
Um,
bit about that.
Yes, basically, Mr. Brabender and Mrs. Brabender. I did not know Mr. Brabender. He passed away in 1970. Mrs. Brabender, on the other hand, I knew her for close to 20 years. I traveled with her for probably I would say close to 20 AACC meetings. So if you've been around a long time, you would see
Wow.
Mrs. Brabender around walking around. So yeah, and we would go to some of the committee meetings, and she was very much involved. And I mean, her background was food. So she migrated to what we did. I mean, Brabender has been around for, I should mention, Brabender's centennial year is this year, 2023. And we've been around for 100 years, but primarily we started on the food side. So that's where she felt more comfortable because I believe she worked at a flour mill.
Excellent. Well, I know Marcus has a little demonstration for us, but first I want to get into a little bit for our bakers primarily, is that we are, most of us are all quite familiar with seeing things like Farino numbers or graphs, like say what the stability time is or the absorption rate or things like that, or the extensive graph values or a mylograph like the falling number and sort of that sort of thing. So let's start. The Farino graph is probably like the most used and the star of things. And let's start with that a little bit to help bakers understand why Farino graph and what does it mean?
Okay, if I may, I mean, Marcus, do you want to do the demo, or you want me to just give it a kind of a rough, non-technical version of our product line as far as the three-phase system?
I think you can start and then I make.
Okay, good deal. Okay,
Perfect.
I would like to. My goal today is really to provide as much fundamental information as possible, so people that are not necessarily in the industry or on the baking side that may not have a science degree out of K-State or North Dakota
Exactly.
State or anything, I want them to understand what these things mean, right? So I would like to bring it down to a very fundamental. And I think about many years ago growing up, my mom making bread or my mom making pizza. So I'm gonna kind of go through the process. And as I'm going through the process, I'm gonna make reference to the device that will handle that particular phase of the process.
Excellent.
So the first thing we do is obviously on the milling side, we take the grain and we mill it, right? So we have the Quadramed Junior, Senior, where we can get around 68 to 70% flour yielded. And now you have the flour. So in the case of the example that I mentioned to you, if my mom is in her kitchen and she has flour, and now you're putting water into the flour. So what is she trying to do? She's trying to achieve, whether she's making
the pasta.
Exactly, yeah, besides that, but she's looking for that familiar consistency, whether it be she's baking cookie, pizza, whatever it is, she's looking for that familiar consistency. She's doing it with her hands. Well, ultimately, you're getting two pieces of information doing that. Number one, you want to determine the water uptake. Well, how do you do that? Farinograph. My mom was doing that many years ago. So she's constantly putting flour and water in there to get that consistency. And when she reaches that familiar consistency for her and to try and make her end product, I like to refer to that as the 500 line. So maybe she didn't realize that she was doing the farinograph test, which is phase number one. And then, of course, the next thing we do, we would mix the dough. And that could be dependent on, for example, if she's doing a cookie, she's doing it very quickly. If she's doing a bread, she's really kneading it even more. That's where you get the stability, the MTI, obviously, there's certain values that change between, let's say, some of the international standards. But at the end of the day, we're trying to focus on numbers and how that relates to the end product to the bakery. So although we don't know that, the people at home, obviously at home, you're just marketing to your family. So they're gonna eat whatever.
Yeah, at home, all you're worried about is you don't want to get hit with the backhand of the nonna that you use to knead the dough with. Right?
Absolutely. So after you go through that whole process, the next thing you do is you take the dough and you put it in a nice bowl and you put it in a place where you let it rest. Well, guess what? That's phase number 2, which is the extensograph. And at the end of the day, you would, obviously there's timelines with that. There's, of course, the standard method is 45, 90, 135, but you're doing the same thing. You're basically letting the dough rest so that you can, at the end of the day, maybe if you're making pizza, you're sheathing it.
Because there's a whole bunch of things that happen during that period.
Exactly. So that's phase number 2. Phase number 3, the last thing you do to that baked good, whether you're making pizza or a baguette or whatever you're making, the last thing you do is you put it in the oven. Well, that's the emulograph. So the emulograph is going to give you information on enzyme, not getting into so super technical stuff because that's Marcus could get into that, but that's information you're going to get during the cooking phase. So in a nutshell, that's ultimately what you're doing. Phase 1, 2, 3. Everyone does it. No one knows that they're doing it, but they're doing it. And how that translates to commercial or industrial applications is that you have to put numbers to these, because at the end of the day, when you're getting flour, you have to make sure that you hit those target numbers, because the easiest thing to do would be to reject the flour. You can't change your process. So that's what you're trying to avoid to do.
Like in the during the pandemic, particularly what we've seen here in North America mostly is that a lot of people, non-commercial bakers have gotten very heavily involved in making their sourdoughs at home and things like that. And the conversations you see are always all about protein. What's the protein in your flour? And, the protein content, whether it be 10%, 12 or 14, is not as relevant as the strength of the flour and the performance and functionality of it, which is what now Marcus can share us a little bit more about in terms of what the farinograph does to give us this data and how we interpret that.
Okay, so I like to touch first here.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah.
Because in the phase 1, we have normally the typical curves like this one, which everyone knows in the baking industry. Shows what happened. If you have this curve, you can make toast. If you have this curve, you can make bread and rolls or biscuit and cakes. These are the typical curves you're having from the standard analysis from ACC, ICC or ISO. But there is an additional benefit for bakers how to use a farinograph. And this is something I like to show you because this is not well known all over the world. This is used in some big companies and they are very successful with this, but not everyone knows it. So the difference is that for this, we test the dough. So what we are doing, we have a special dough control method, and I prepared it for 480 grams of dough, and we can start the measurement. What you can see here, I have a special bowl. So this is not the normal bowl. It's only to show you how the dough is mixed
For
during the
demonstration. Yep.
And this is a typical standard bowl we have, and this is only to show. So what we are doing, or what the customers are doing in this case, is they put the dough inside, they start the test. Now it's everything, every time when we make demos.
Now you've made the dough up ahead of time, but that's not always the way
No.
the instrument functions, right? I mean,
No, we have a very short mixing time of only 1 minute and 13 seconds. This is, the customers take the dough from the production, 480
even
grams,
better. Oh,
take
yes.
it from the production, put it in the mixer, they get a curve. Here you see a reference curve, or maybe it's better on the big screen. We have here a reference curve.
Yep.
And from the production dough, after only 1 minute 30 seconds, you have an idea, you get the results if you are in the tolerance of the normal production dough. And if
Excellent.
you are
Yep.
outside of the result of the tolerance, you know I have to put more water inside or I have to add more flour.
Uh-huh. Yep, that's excellent. Yes, I was trained on it from a flour milling perspective, where we put the flour in the mixer and then add the water, and then we had this little paper trail that came out. So we had an old one. This is nice. So,
This is a very simple additional benefit of the device because many people have the device.
yep.
You can use it without additional cost, and now we have only 10 seconds more or 15 seconds more, and then you see a short evaluation which gives you the information you need.
Yep. That's excellent. So now we can see where it mixes up, and you can see the tension, the strength of the flour or the dough, right?
So as you can see here, the tolerance we like to have for the production dough is between 426 and 456. This dough with this viscosity is red. Red means out of tolerance.
Yep.
So the baker knows he has to change the recipe, he has to add more water, to change the flour or something like this. And he saves a lot of money because now he knows it in time and
Yep.
not wait late.
Yeah, because it's taking too much energy to mix the dough. Yeah.
Okay, this is what I like to demonstrate here.
Yep.
Maybe there are some questions about it.
Excellent. No, that's perfect. So this allows you to do your farinograph evaluations in line during production, and then adjust your water so that even though the C of A may say one thing, you can do your final adjustments in real time on the production line this way.
Yep.
Yep. That's very good. And so the graph that you were showing us, the top number is the stability. Is that correct?
No, the top number is the viscosity at the end of the measurement. So not the stability, because the dough was completely produced. So it was mixed for the normal time of 10 minutes or 5 minutes, depending from the mixer the baker has. So everything is completely mixed. So stability is not the thing we like to test. We only look for the viscosity. Because if the dough is too soft, so the viscosity is too low, then you have later on the band during the transportation through the process, the dough get flatter and flatter and has not the right viscosity. And also the baking volume at the end will not be that high.
Excellent. And so now from here now, Sal, we go to the second phase, which is the extensograph.
Yeah. Before I get to the second phase, I just want to add something to the.
Sure, yeah.
I refer to it as unconventional because, you know, being involved as much as I have been, and I noticed that, Mark, you were a little bit like confused as far as the dough rheology part of it, because your background is the flour milling.
Yes, where I worked on it was always from the flour milling aspect.
Of course, and that's typically what the farinograph is intended for originally, with the water uptake, the mixing properties, and so on. But it should be noted that I'm not quite sure. I can't speak about the European or the international market. I can only speak about the USA and Canada. I would say that better than almost 50%, believe it or not, of the use of the farinograph is using this dough method online stuff. So it's used. The difference is that you can't have a standard method around that, right? The standard methodologies really apply internally, as opposed to having an AACC or an ICC method where you have a flour and you're measuring water uptake. Likewise, phase number two. Phase number two, which is the extensograph, which is not as widely used in the U.S. And partially that's because who dictates these information on the certificate of analysis are the bakers, and the bakers are typically saying, okay, I would say that as far as the physical numbers, not the non-physical numbers, regarding the physical numbers on the certificate of analysis, most of these numbers are going to be the MTI, depending on the part of the world that you're reporting to. Obviously, the US and Canadian market, it's going to be the MTI. Maybe in the international markets, they have something called a degree of softening. But it's the same thing. Ultimately, you're measuring the resistance of dough over a period of time on the 500 line. So it should be. I just wanted to mention that because that's important in that respect. The other thing that I want to mention along the lines of the farinograph, because I mean, obviously with Marcus's demo, he didn't utilize it, but we should mention the aqua inject. And I've done so many workshops, and I can't tell you how many people are not aware that we have an aqua inject. And what the aqua inject is basically is a way of titrating. It's not a dosing system. There's a difference. When you have a dosing system, you dial in the number. So if you have a flour of 68%, you could say, okay, 68%, you put the water in, and whatever you have, and then you have to make the adjustment after the fact. But with the aqua inject, what's so unique about it is that if you put in if let's say hypothetically your flour absorption is 64%, but you want to put in less because you can't take the water out, but you can titrate the water in. Yes. You could literally say 55 or 58. It'll titrate without your supervision. It'll titrate the correct amount of water, making the test, the farinograph test, as objective, not subjective. Because at the end of the day, up until a few years ago, we were either dosing the system, whether it be with a glass burette or just with a dosing system. But the aqua inject, it should be noted that that's whenever I do workshops, I will be doing a workshop later this year. I always use that as a demo. So I know the water absorption is 62, but I'll put 55 in there. And as I'm speaking to the students, I'll turn around and say, I guarantee you it's 62%. And normally it's right on the money.
So the aqua injector is essentially adjusting the water amount to reach the 500 line of stability, yes. of viscosity. And so that way you will know precisely, you can validate, as you were saying, it's 62%, you're validating that it's 62%.
Yes. But
if your C of A says it's 64 and you run it, you start it at 60 and let it run, and it turns out it's 64, you got a good C of A. If it's not, then maybe somebody's not telling the truth.
But just keep in mind, though, because, I mean, generally speaking, I can tell you with certainty, because I've used this machine during workshops and even here in New Jersey, I can guarantee you that if it's all working properly, we could determine the water absorption within one test, which is unheard of for other devices in the industry. We can determine it within one test. That's amazing. But now keep in mind, you have to put in less than you think, because you can't take the water out.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I like when you mentioned the burette, that's kind of because my training on this instrument goes back like almost 20 years, right? And so that's kind of what we were doing is we were adding the water until we got to the right viscosity.
You were titrating it.
We had to clean the whole thing out and then start over again with a fresh flour from the same lot, and then make sure that we got all the right readings and stuff like that. So
Yes,
it
yes,
was a lot more tedious, messy.
yes,
So,
yes.
guess who got to clean the farinograph all the time?
Yes,
Right?
of course.
So,
If I may, I just want to I bought some props today
mhm.
as I was coming here. So I just want to just kind of drive home the Farino, because that's really the lion's share of the market for the USA and Canada. As far as the extensor, I'm going to default back to my colleague just for some kind of overview on the extensor, but just to kind of drive home for the baking side, because we are an instrument manufacturer, and it's an instrument for laboratory. So the biggest challenge is trying to convince people that these machines are valuable, right? So I just want to show you the end product of some of this flour, and so that you have a fundamental understanding how valuable it is to the baker. For example, we have here, I mean, everyone knows what this is. This is premium cracker, salty.
Yeah.
This is basically done with soft flour. Soft flour that can be generated on the North American side in the Ohio Valley or the Pacific Northwest. But at the end of the day, when you're running a farinograph for this, and these have specific certificate of analysis number, you have to achieve certain values. The dough development time would be fairly short. So you're going to get the dough development time within a minute or two. Now we have bread, Italian bread. You know how to throw in the Italian bread, right? So ultimately, with the Italian bread, you have the dough development time that will take 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes. Now, can you imagine you have flour A making the Italian bread and flour B making the saltine cracker? If you basically use the flour for the wrong application, your production is going to be all messed up, because if you're over mixing, if you're mixing and you have the parameters set up for the Italian bread and you're over mixing and you're trying to make the saltine crackers, at the end of 5 minutes, your farinogram is going to be so low, the dough is going to be sticky. You're going to have to shut down the production. You're talking about lost time, and in the end, what are you cutting out? A $50,000 instrument, as opposed to millions of dollars in terms of production loss and cost. So
yes,
on the baking side, a lot of times they rely on the numbers. They really have to have a fundamental understanding what those numbers mean in relations to.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's a really good way of putting it, right?
So I'll leave it to Marcus to get into the extensive, because I think.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the extensograph, Marcus?
Yeah, of course, I can do it. So the extensograph is the second phase, and it's a little bit a copy of the production processes after the making of the dough. So you have resting time in the production, you have working on the dough, you have again resting time, you have proving time, and every time after this minutes, the dough is worked on. So it's necessary to know a little bit what happened during the steps with the dough, what is the strength of the dough, the elasticity, and also what happened at the end in the oven. So the extensograph is a unit which measures the dough 3 times. After 45 minutes, the first resting time, 90 minutes, the second resting time, and 135 minutes, the last resting time, which is similar to that what happened in the oven. As example, if we go to these pictures before I make the demo, we have different curves here, and depending of the type of curve, you can see the volume of the breads are different.
Yep.
So this is a very strong, tough dough.
Yep.
So
Very
the
peaked.
volume is very small. The yeast has not enough power to build a volume because the gluten is too strong. And here the gluten is too soft. So you have flat breads at the end. And this for Germany and also in other countries or Europe, this is a typical curve to make a good white bread. And the procedure is very simple. We have here a fermentation cabinet with 30 degrees, and you have the dough inside. You prepare it here to make a bowl. Then you put the bowl inside here to get this cylinder. And then after the time of resting, you put it here, and the dough is stretched very simple. And this gives the baker and also the miller some additional information about the quality, about the elasticity of the dough after the fermentation time. So this dough has not enough time to rest because it's a demo that the dough is stretched until here.
Yep.
And from this, you get these curves to evaluate for what purpose the dough is the best, or if you have to add some enzymes or something like this.
Yeah. So that you have the right amount of extensibility. If
Yeah.
it has too much extensibility, not enough force, then your dough is too soft. If it has very little extensibility and breaks early, in this case, it was not rested enough, but also it could be that, say, the gluten is too strong, that it won't expand, it breaks easily.
Yeah, and this is an additional help for the bakers to see for what is the flour for what can the flour be used. So we have no bad or good flour. We have to find the right application for the
Yep.
flour.
Yeah. So we have protein is one piece of information. Farinograph obviously gives us the viscosity piece of the information in terms of the flow of the dough, and the extensograph gives us the strength, the extensibility of the dough.
Yeah.
And then we have now the third phase is the amylograph, and so that's the enzyme activity, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Demo because many things what is behind the test. So you have a slurry with flour and water. You with 1.5 degrees. What is what oven, and then you get different curves. And this very high curve, low enzyme activity, the starch can and comparable to the falling number here, that's around 300, 400 seconds. And then you have the different curves for different quality. Europe with 400 amylograph units, and low or the high, then you have a low curve because all the starch is. Then you have a very wide crumb network to make a very strong crumb.
And so that's helping us see the effects of having enough or too little or too much enzyme as it affects the starch because of how it breaks down the starch.
Yes, all the times. So we
Okay, can you move a little closer to Marcus? The sound is breaking up a little bit.
okay, maybe now it's better.
Yes, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, so at the end, this is also a long. This test also need a long time, because also to bake a bread in the oven need a long time. And this is a copy what happened in the oven inside of the bread with the crumb.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. This is really good. This has been really informative, gentlemen. And as you, I recall you guys as we were in the green room getting ready. You're looking forward to, like Sal, you said you're in New Jersey. I'm
Yes.
in Nova Scotia. In case you guys weren't aware, I'm way up north in the Great White North in Canada, and Marcus is in Germany. And you are looking forward to meeting each other again in
Yes.
person again in
Yes.
October. So
Yes.
you'll be exhibiting. Brabender will be exhibiting at IBA, at the
Yes.
Internationale Bäckerei-Ausstellung, the
Yeah.
International Bakery Exhibition, and that's in Munich this year again, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm always looking forward to spending time with my colleague Marcus. I'll be seeing him in October. Since you didn't mention EBA, I want to just kind of hold up one more prop.
Sure, absolutely.
So we will be in the booth, right?
Yeah.
So I invite anyone that's watching this to come up to me, I will be in Munich along with the Brabender, with Marcus, and my other colleagues in Germany. Look for either Marcus or myself, and we will mention this Bakerpedia interview, and we will hand you this. It's
Farinograph
by
handbook.
Jane Bach and Clyde Don. This is the 4th edition of the Farinograph handbook. So I will
Wow, awesome.
gladly hand it to you, but you have to. There's only 2 rules. Number 1, You have to mention the Bakerpedia interview. And number 2, you have to request a proposal for a new Farinograph.
It's excellent.
All
That's
right.
super. Yeah.
I'll have
Yeah,
it in my backpack. So
and that to give kudos to that book. Dr. Jane Bach is
yes,
also one of our supporters with Bakerpedia. She is one of our Baker influencers, and she's an excellent resource
she
as
is.
well.
Yes.
In all likelihood, I'm sure she will be at the show in person. If not exhibiting, I'm sure she will be there, representing the American Wheat Board. And so, yeah, she's a fantastic resource. She's Canadian too, by the way, right?
Yeah.
In case you didn't know.
Yes. I've known her many years. Yeah.
I love promoting Canada, in case you didn't notice. So,
You're from Well, I know that you were in Mississauga when I was.
I worked
visiting.
in the Mississauga location for ADM. Yes, I was I was originally born in Canada. I lived in a part of Toronto called the High Park area. So there's a large oak savanna there that is a natural oak savanna, and it's a huge park. It's I can't remember. It's like 60 blocks from the north to the south, right? And it's probably bigger than Central Park, but it's natural. It's not man-made.
So since you and Marcus share where you were born, I should state that I was born in Sicily.
There you go.
Yes,
See, that's where the most stubborn people come from. I heard. I've heard that the Calabrese is panadore.
Yes, yes. I'm from southern Sicily, a town called Scoglitti, Provincia di Ragusa, but that's where I'm from. Since we all talked about where we're from, I had to throw that in.
Fantastic. That is great. That's super. Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been wonderful meeting you. This has been very informative. Anything you'd like to add, Marcus, please?
Yeah. Yes, I like to have 2 minutes more if possible.
Sure, please.
Yeah. We have one thing more, which is for interest for bakers, which need only 2 minutes test time. And so I need only 2 minutes to explain what it is.
That's excellent. Yeah.
So we have the glue to peak. It's a high shear method.
Yeah.
And maybe after I show you here the curves, we can go to the device that everyone has an idea how it looks. So what we are doing is we have flour and water in a bowl, and we make a high-speed mixing with 2,750 rounds per minute.
Mm-hmm.
And you have here 2 examples, 2 flours with the same protein content. And here we have 2 flours with the same wet gluten content.
Mm-hmm.
And the baking results every time are different. If we start with the protein content, both was 14% around.
Mm-hmm.
The elasticity of the dough was completely different of the gluten, not of the dough, which has to do something with gliadin and glutenin content.
Yes, the quality of the protein.
Yeah, this is much more stronger than this one. And because the second peak is more elastic, the volume of the bread is higher. And the same you have with the wet gluten content. We have similar wet gluten content. And also here, one is very strong, like we have it in the extensograph minutes before, and one is more elastic. So the peak comes later. We are looking every time for the highness of the peak and the time to get it. And also here, the second one is more elastic and more volume for the bread. So
that
we
is
have
perfect.
Here a method in 2 minutes, which gave you these results in addition to the things you get from the 3-phase system.
Yes, it's not going to tell you the ratios of the glutenin or the gliadin, but it's going to give you more important information as to the functionality and understanding that.
Yeah, but we have also correlations to give also correlations for the wet gluten content. So when this is the bowl, this is the pedal, you prepare everything, you close it, and then it starts. So this is all you have to do if you run this test. So it's very easy and very common, and it's very helpful also in the grain reception, because in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending from the grain or flour you test, you have an indication about the quality. So that's all I like to mention at the end of this wonderful event.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Marcus.
30 more seconds from my side regarding the Gluto Peak. Just from the North American market, there's been a lot of traction on this. I mean, Jane gave a presentation at the Pacific Northwest Quality Conference at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, January, and there's a lot more to come in terms of because of the obsolescence of the mixograph. So they're looking at this instrument as a potential replacement, but there's a lot of things going on behind anyone can reach out to us and we can give you more information, like
Yep.
like Marcus said about the correlations and such and so forth.
Yeah, no, that's it's very informative. It's very useful. It really clearly demonstrates the difference you get in the composition of the flower, and like how I always like how Dr. Lin explains is kind of the gliadin is the rubber bands, right? And no, sorry, the glutenin is the rubber bands that makes it all rubbery, and the gliadin is like the ball bearings that make it more extensible. And so this, because you can't really see those proteins, with any quick or easy analysis, this is an amazing and excellent way to get good information so you can keep your products consistent and or apply the flour to the right type of product, right? If you need a flour that is weaker or more, less extensible, then you can use it for that sort of thing, right? This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time, gentlemen. If anybody has any questions about these things, please, you can add them to the posting of this video, or look us up on YouTube, where the video will live in the future in a few days. Or you can email me, mark.florka@bakerpedia.com. But since that's kind of hard to spell, you can also email support@bakerpedia.com. And they will get the questions to us. And maybe we can do a whole nother chat together on some questions that people have. So thank you very much, and really appreciate your time today. And that's your Thought Leadership Thursday. Say bye-bye for now, and see you later. Hope to meet you soon, Sal and Marcus.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, and have a good evening in Germany.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.